So I'm just sort of letting my nervous system settle down a little bit. I wanted to start off with, has anybody experienced a shift? Like anything shift since you arrived when you first came here? Anyone feeling a little better when you first arrived? I know I am. I'm not surprised. But on, I don't even remember what day it was it Saturday? Saturday I was sitting right there and I was listening to Amy, and Amy came up here and she said, you know, I just love giving talks. And I remember sitting there thinking, I am dreading Monday. And I was just so uncomfortable. And I thought, my goodness, like, I'm never going to feel that way. And in the process of listening to Amy speak, something she shared really touched me. And I had been aware of, you know, the nerves, the dread, the feelings of tension. And I'd been doing a pretty good job of staying open to my experience, like feeling the sensations, allowing the feelings to be there. But there was something that you said, Amy, so thank you, there you are, where you talked about, you know, you put your hand up and it's like the thought. You said something would bring it closer. And I hadn't realized until that moment that I had been using the principles against myself. And I had been, and I loved the way that you were talking about it, and that like there's these vague ideas, they're like kind of over there. And I hadn't realized that I was resisting them because I thought that, oh, I know they're not true. I don't need to pay any attention to them because they're not true. But I was actually intellectually creating a form of resistance in myself and keeping them over there, thinking that I was just not buying into my thinking. But clearly, based on how I was feeling, I was buying into my thinking. And so, you know, in that moment, like in a second as that happens, I just allow them to come in. You know, the thoughts of not being good enough, the thoughts of feeling unworthy, the thoughts of shame. But as soon as they got close, as soon as I wasn't resisting anymore and I just surrendered to them, I was able to feel other sensations than dread. And actually, it felt better to feel the vulnerability of feeling not good enough. It felt better to not resist the feelings of shame, the feelings of being unlovable. And as soon as I could feel them, and I felt very young. It was really, these are, you know, feelings from a very long time ago that have been with me. But there was just a natural compassion that emerged. And that's healing, right? That's it. There's nothing really more than that. And as soon as that shift happened, I was no longer in the dread. I was no longer in the, oh God. I was like, oh, I can be here. I can be present. And literally, I slept well last night, had a great sleep. I'm excited to be here this morning. I can't even say I love giving talks, Amy. Thank you. You saved my life. As well as many others, I know that. But it's like that. I wanted to share that because that's kind of what's being pointed to in the metaphor of rewilding, and I'll talk a little bit more about that Angus and I use in our work. But it's really about being open to the fullness of your experience, but also seeing the health in all of it. There was nothing wrong with the resistance that I had. There was nothing wrong with being unconscious to the fact that I was using the principles understanding against myself in that moment. That was all part of the unfolding. And really there's, you know, as I see it, there's love, there's our true nature of love, and then there's everything else that is in support of us waking up to that true nature. Everything else is supporting that. And so my resistance, my nerves, my feeling of dread, none of that was wrong, none of that was bad. It didn't mean anything about me. And it supported me with having that experience of feeling more deeply the impact of those misunderstandings in my consciousness, so that I could feel that compassion, that natural state of love arise within me. And so that's what the metaphor of rewilding is pointing to. And I'll give you a little bit of context for that. It's a term that's used in nature conservation to talk about how the environment can be rewilded back into its natural processes. And that there's this innate intelligence in nature that allows it to do that, which kind of sounds familiar. But I didn't know about this term. Angus was the one that introduced it to me. And he said, oh, there's this video that you really need to watch. And it's on YouTube. I think it's called How Wolves Change Rivers. And it's a little nature clip. And Angus loves nature documentaries. And ever since we've been together, he's like, oh, wanting me to watch nature documentaries with him. And I'm like, not really into nature documentaries, not kind of my thing. And then one day he knows that I love cats. And so there's this nature documentary about lions and there's like pride of lions in Africa. And he says, watch this with me, just enjoy it. So I'm like, okay, I love cats, let's watch this documentary. So of course I'm watching this documentary, and one of the reasons I don't like nature documentaries is I can find them quite upsetting by their content. And so all of a sudden, the male lion is killed in this pride, and another male lion comes in, and I'm not even going to go into the details, but it was not good. And I'm like, I am never watching another nature documentary with you again. So anyway, I was a little resistant to watching this clip that he wanted to show me on YouTube, but there was nothing bad in it, and I encourage you to watch it. And what the clip was about was how wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone Park in the US. And they had been natural to that environment, but they'd been absent for hundreds of years. And so the conservationists decided to bring in a small pack of wolves into Yellowstone Park to see what would happen. They felt it would be good for the environment, but they didn't really know exactly what was going to happen from that. And I think that's also really wonderful, is that with rewilding, we don't really know what's going to happen. We know that it's a good thing, but who knows what the impact is going to be. And so what happened was, one of the things that changed was that the deer that were grazing in the valleys, because there were now wolves in the environment, had to move to different parts. There was more shelter. And so this allowed the trees to grow back. And so it started with a few trees, and then it became a forest. And with the trees coming back, the birds came back. And with the birds coming back, other kinds of creatures like the beavers. And so there was just this whole ecological system shift. But what they didn't expect was how with the trees, the root systems reinforced the riverbanks. And so the riverbanks actually changed their course and shifted their meandering. And so not only did the animal system change, but the physical geography of Yellowstone Park changed from this one small pack of wolves being introduced. And so when I watched this documentary with Angus, it's like 10 minutes, when I watched this clip with Angus, it just occurred to me, it's like, oh, this is what we do in our work with couples. We help them to be rewilded back to their natural state of love. They come to us, and through the experience, they have a deeper experience of that place within themselves. And in that, cascade events happen that we're not responsible for, that we don't make happen, and that we can't predict. And so Angus talks about, the laundry list of woes. So couples often come to us with their laundry list of woes. And we don't need to worry about that laundry list, because when they have that deeper experience with themselves, they either see that list differently, or the list kind of disappears, it's no longer important to them. And that doesn't mean that the couple necessarily stays together. I was talking to someone just before this talk, and she said, marriage is a construct. And it's like, yeah, marriage is a construct. But we can make decisions about our relationships from a place of love, from a place of open-heartedness, from a place of caring. And from that place of understanding within ourselves, we open up to what's possible when what looked completely impossible. Just like me on Saturday night, when it looked completely impossible for me to feel happy and joyful about being here in front of all of you today. But like that, it shifts. And I think we all know that. We've all experienced that in various ways. And we're all being rewilded by our true nature of love. It's not something that we are having to do or work on. It is natural and innate within us. That nature wants to express itself, wants to come through to the surface, wants to become more conscious within us. And so we can relax, and that was kind of what Sue was pointing to at the beginning in the introduction. I spent many, many years feeling like I needed to do something to have that deeper connection with myself, that it was going to be through the process of self-improvement that I could get there. And it was a misunderstanding that somehow I was in control of this process or could control the process. And it's been such a weight off of my shoulders to realize that I can let go, I can trust. And I think that's one of the most profound things about being here with you right now, is that when I was feeling that dread, I wasn't able to trust that I could be safe here with you right now. Even though intellectually, that's crazy to think that, you're all lovely people. But on a deeper level, I didn't know. And with that shift came a knowing. And that I'm not safe because of you. I'm safe because of that more conscious connection with that space within myself. And it would be okay if I didn't feel safe. And I knew that if I still felt dread, when I came up here, I was going to tell you that. And I knew that that would be okay too. I knew that I didn't have to be anything that I wasn't in this moment. And I think that that is something that we can forget. You know, we can forget that we're enough. And that's been said so many times in so many ways. And I can still forget that. And that's okay. And so one of the other reasons I love the unpredictability of the term rewilding is that it really speaks to the unpredictability of this journey of awakening, if you see it as a journey, because it is really unpredictable, and yet we like to predict. And I know I thought I knew. I had all kinds of ideas about what it meant and what it would look like and what being more awake looked like and more evolved looked like. And I would become very attached to certain experiences that I thought were more spiritual than other experiences, and that I liked more than other feelings. And one of the shocks that came up for me is, you know, after sort of feeling more inner freedom, feeling more spaciousness, feeling more able to be myself in the world, in my life, I came up against a growing edge. And I think that's what happens so often as we experience more inner freedom and drop into deeper states of knowing who we are. We all of a sudden have greater internal safety to experience some of the things that we might not have been able to experience previously. And so often when those feelings can come up that feel challenging or difficult or feel shameful or uncomfortable, we can judge that and feel like somehow we're going backwards, that somehow it's not meant to be, somehow we've forgotten the understanding, somehow we're doing it wrong. And so one of my experiences with that, because I've had many, but this is the one that jumped out to me, was that I was living a whole lot more free and feeling a lot more peace, feeling so much less anxiety in my life, and so grateful for that. And then I'm at home. One of my daughters is going off on me. And it's really, you know, she's sensitive and wears her heart on her sleeve. You could see she takes after her dad, but anyway. And I'm one that tends to go more inward with my feelings, or at least I used to. And, you know, all of the loving intentions, conscious parenting, wanting to hold space for her. And I just got angry. And this is not, I'm not advocating losing your temper with your kids. I want to be really clear, that's not the message that I'm saying. But in that greater freedom, I had less repression. I had less of my conditioning. And there was a learning curve that I had to have with anger. And that was a painful part of the learning curve because I definitely felt ashamed afterwards. And, you know, we had to talk it through and, you know, it was a long time ago, but we made it out. But I had been, you know, anger was a blind spot for me. I didn't really see myself as an angry person, but it was seeping out sideways. You know, and if you talk to Angus, my husband, he would have been pretty clear that he could see it. And he could feel the criticism, he could feel the judgment, he could feel the passive-aggressive comments, the impatience, that's the one that he would know, my impatience. And maybe it was subtle, or not so subtle, but it was not that clear to me that that's what it was. But in the greater freedom, in the greater health, I started to be able to have a conscious experience of anger and to be able to be on a learning curve with it and integrate the health of it. Because in that moment with my daughter, there was a boundary that needed to be put in place. Didn't necessarily need to be said in the way that I said it, but there was a healthy boundary that previously in my parenting and in other parts of my life, I had not been honoring because I thought I needed to be loving, I needed to be kind, I needed to be compassionate. All of the concepts had me ignore what was alive and true inside of me and needed to be said. And so with that, bringing it into consciousness, there's more aliveness, there's more wholeness inside of me. And I was able to be on a learning curve with it, and I did get better. And so it didn't really matter that, you know, it wasn't so great and it looked kind of messy at the beginning. Because I could be with it, because I had the space to be with those feelings that I hadn't been able to be with previously, I got better at not being reactive to it, being able to feel the experience and not reactive from that place. And I also get better at being able to share honestly what worked for me and what didn't work for me, which I hadn't been doing. And I hadn't been doing that in my relationship with her. That's why it was like, whoa, because it kind of, the lid came off in that moment. But the reason that I'm sharing this is to really help everybody see the health in all of the experience. There's health in all of our feelings. There's a learning curve that we're on. And there's nothing wrong with our learning curve. We're doing the best that we can. And so often, through our judgments, through our ideas about what it is to be a loving person, what it is to be a three principles practitioner, we get in the way of that natural impulse, the natural health, because we think love looks this way. We have our concept of what it is, you know. And so that, again, was a humbling experience, but it really helped me to see the value of not knowing and really allowing and trusting the health in it all and being able to see the innate, deeper level of love that was expressing even in that moment, trying to come through, even if it was messy. And we all have this conditioning. And there's that tension between the conditioning and that freedom that we experience within ourselves. You know, we're born, and there's the conditioning of our family, the conditioning of our culture, society, religion, science, three principles, you know, whatever. There's all of these concepts that we take on. And yet we have these moments when we drop out of all those concepts and we feel the beauty of that. We feel the power of that. But then what happened with me is that I would think, well, that's better than this. This is good, and that's bad, right? And I started to see that, oh, the tension is actually good. There's nothing wrong with the tension. That's all part of the unfolding. I don't need to resist that. I don't need to try and get rid of that. In fact, I don't think I will as a human this lifetime. And that tension doesn't, again, mean anything about me or you. And that it's actually in having room for that, having room for all of that, that there is greater freedom, greater peace of mind. And that's what was, the quote that's on the flyer for this program, the one by Sydney Banks. I can't repeat it. I'm not very good at remembering things when I'm speaking. But the quote on the front of your flyer about not being afraid of your experience that Sydney Banks was pointing to. It's like, that's all of your experience. None of it is wrong. And so as I started to sort of feel the greater spaciousness, which is still an ongoing experience, as you know, from Friday. It's like, that wasn't easy to make room for all of that. But my encouragement is to really see that this rewilding by the natural state, it's okay for it to be unpredictable. It's okay for you not to know. Like, are you willing to let go of your judgments about what your experience looks like? Are you willing to really feel that self-compassion that shows up when you're just with experience? And this is another thing that was a struggle for me, because I had done all kinds of trainings that were all about practicing self-forgiveness. It's like you say the words, you say the limiting belief. But what I experienced on Saturday was a spontaneous experience of that. And that feels completely different than an intellectual experience of that. And so to be able to have room for both, right? The intellectual experience of that and the deeper felt experience of that. And see that the tension between the two that can be there allows us to experience things more deeply, allows us to wake up to what's true. And one of the other areas of conditioning that I noticed that came up a lot for me was around sort of feeling the natural rewilding, you could say, come through, and then having the conditioning say, no, that's not, you can't do that. You can't do that. Who are you to do that? Or that's going to be embarrassing. Can't do that. And so I really started to notice that there was the easy yeses, the yeses that we have that inner prompting of yes, and then there's the ease with which that just happens. And then there's these other kind of yeses that are coming from that deeper place, that natural impulse, the impulse to express more love in the world, to express more of who you are into the world, to have the generosity of spirit, the generosity of heart. And then there's all the conditioning that can come in. And then it can feel like a no, because there's not a great feeling on that. It's a nice feeling to start with, and then there's a key feeling. And I started to see that, there's a possibility of staying true to the yes, while having all of the other icky feelings, and not having that be a problem, not having that mean that I'm not going in the right direction, not have that be the indicator that I follow. And the icky feeling, the insecurity, the feelings of worthlessness, whatever they might be that would come up for me, just because they're there, when I can be with them, but still honor that yes, there can be that compassion that comes in those moments too. So it doesn't have to be a pushing through, because that was the other thing that I used to do. It's like resist my feelings, resist all of those icky feelings, but just push through anyway. And that was exhausting. That was the recipe for burnout, and I definitely felt that. And so I just invite you to just notice for yourselves, how do those inner prompts show up for you? How do you hear the feedback of your true nature? What does that feel like? And so often we're such a cognitive culture in the West. There's so much emphasis in our education system put on the intellect that so often we're in our mind about that. But what I found really helpful is to also include the body in that and to listen to the feedback. That's not just mental feedback. It can be sensation feedback. It can be emotional feedback. But to really open to the fullness of what's being communicated to you. And to be able to feel safe with how the communication shows up, even if it feels intense. I have no idea of the time, so let me have one. Okay. So I wanted to have a little experiential moment here, so if you're willing to play along with me. But what I wanted to ask you to do in this moment is to just allow yourself to tune in and to, if you want to have your eyes open, have your eyes closed, that's fine, but just to tune in inwardly and listen. See what you notice in terms of the inner prompts that are present in this moment right now. Because we're socialized to sit still, to behave, all this like good students in the classroom bed. And that might not be what really, truly in this moment is aligned for you. It might be, but it might not be. And so I want to give you permission, and I'm going to give some prompts. My prompts might have nothing to do with what is occurring inside of you. They're just hints. But I want you to listen internally to what feels good to you in this moment. And I'll just say a little bit about this piece around pleasure. Because often pleasure is looked on as something that is not good. It's not really valued much sometimes. Like hard work is often valued more than pleasure. Working hard and pushing through and getting somewhere. And so often the simple pleasure of really tuning into what feels good to the body. What feels good on the emotional level. What feels good on the mental level in this moment. Just allow yourself. And it can feel scary because sometimes when we let go of that pushing through, we're met with a lot of feeling. I know I have been. We can be met with a lot of unexpected emotion. Tears can come up, anger can come up. So often when we're on that path towards settling down, we think, oh, we're going to get zen, we're going to have feeling of peace, but often we're not met with feelings of peace when we get quiet. We're met with a deeper experience of the unrest that's going on, the feedback that we've been ignoring, the healthy feedback that we've been functioning over because we feel like it's not going to be helpful to stay with ourselves. So in this moment, as you stay with yourself, is there any kind of prompt that you're noticing? Maybe it's to stretch a little bit, maybe it's to move your body. And again, it might not be there, and you might have something else, and if you're tuned into it, I want to give you permission to just do whatever that is for yourself. Maybe you want to walk around, maybe somebody wants to leave. I won't take it personally. I might take it personally, but it doesn't matter if I do. So it's like, really give yourself permission. Look at that, yeah. Let things move. Listen. Is anybody missing someone? Make a phone call. Call someone that they love. Yeah, just let the energy move through you. It doesn't need to be repressed. It doesn't need to be ignored. There's room for it. There's room for it here anyway. So does anybody want a hug? Is anybody feeling the need for a hug? Oh, look, there we go. Anybody else? I'm from California, so hugging happens a lot. Aw, they're just happening spontaneously. So what else? What else feels good? Aw. Anybody else want to hold hands? Check first if you don't know the person. Consent is important. What about noise? Does anybody want to make some noise? Like, oh! like what else? Let's get untamed a little bit. I'm really giving you permission. It's okay. Does it feel uncomfortable? Is there a little bit like, oh, I don't know? Just let yourself go with it. Yes. Woo! Who is it? The salsa. Come on. So I'm just giving you this example because so often we go through our days not noticing what wants to be expressed through us. Like we might notice the big, oh yeah, that inspiration. But what about the little moment-to-moment inspirations that remind you to drink the water, that remind you to go to the bathroom, that remind you to rest, that remind you to take a break, that just have you be more in tune with the natural impulse that is inside each one of us, that is wanting to be expressed more fully, that is right there. And of course the conditioning is going to come up. But as I said, when the conditioning comes up, that's the opportunity to be with it and to see what gets revealed from that. When I think about the tension, you can think about like a musical instrument that has a string, and with that tension, beautiful music gets created. Without that tension, you don't get the beautiful music. And so it's okay to have the conditioning and the deeper impulses of your true nature. It's okay for there to be the tension between them. Because that allows you to create the beautiful music of who you are. It doesn't need to be fought with. You get to just allow yourself to experience it. So that's everything I've got to say. And I know that there's still some time, so I'm very happy to complete here if people are done. But if anybody has anything they'd like to share or any questions, I'm also happy for that. So I'll let people decide what feels right for you. Looks like we're done. Oh, there's a hand at the back. Do you want, should I pass the microphone? Yeah. I can't hear.
Let me just run the mic.
Yeah. Is this one on too? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for this lovely talk. I just wanted to ask you this question. You said earlier, of course, all feelings are okay, which they are. And my question is, how are actually our feelings of grief or sadness or loneliness, how are they related to mind, to the universal field? Are they part of it, or do they arise from it? So that's my question.
I guess that I don't see anything as separate from mind. So they're just another expression of it, is how I see it. And that just like with the physical body, when we're sick, the physical body gets a fever, and the fever might not feel good. We might feel achy and tired and need to go to bed, but that's our health expressing itself. That's the body healing. And so our emotions are part of that health within us, that is the nervous system doing what it needs to do to rebalance and heal. And it's just energy moving through us that allows us to wake up more fully to mind, wake up more fully to that space of love within us. And that I know for myself with grief, especially, I've really been aware of how grief is, it's not something that I can control. It's just like it just kind of emerges and happens. And it can be really unexpected too. My father passed at the beginning of this year in January, and I was, people were saying, when you lose a parent, that's a big deal, and obviously it is a big deal, but I kind of had these expectations of what grief would look like when you lose your father. And I kind of was confused because I didn't have the experience that I thought I was going to have. And I just had this incredible heart-opening experience of being included in my family, being part of the rituals and the ceremonies and the community support and just being with my stepmom, my brother, and just going through that. And I felt like, oh, this is wrong. I shouldn't be feeling this much love. I shouldn't be feeling this good. But that's what I experienced. And yet I've lost a cat and been devastated. And that doesn't mean, like, when I came back to London this time, it's the first time I've been back since he passed. And as soon as I was going through at Heathrow, the place where you go through that area to the people that meet you, and I was hit with a wave of grief, because normally my dad would be waiting there to pick me up from the airport, and of course he's not there physically. And so, having that experience of loss and just letting it move through me. But I don't know what that's going to look like. But there's an intelligence within me, within all of us, that is expressing. And what I find is the more open I am to that, even the more open I am to my resistance of that, it's like more just gets revealed. And there's more and more safety. I think one of the things that I really struggled with before this understanding, and that I'm so grateful for this understanding for, is the greater safety that I experience with all of my feelings now that I didn't feel before. I was really scared of a lot of my feelings. And I really judged myself for having certain feelings. I really thought that I needed to get rid of feelings in order to be worthy, that somehow certain feelings, having them, meant that I was unworthy. And for this understanding to point so clearly to our essential nature being completely untouched by form, the form of our thoughts, the form of our feelings, the form of our body, that is whole no matter what. Whether we experience wholeness or not in the moment, it's still whole. We are whole. And that even when we don't feel whole, that doesn't mean we're not whole. And that there can be such an exquisiteness in being with the feelings of not wholeness, because that's part of the waking up to our wholeness. Anyone else? Yes.
I would just love...
Oh, there Sheila.
I would just love, since we had time to learn a bit of the process that you go through with couples, whether it's always the same or it very much depends on the couple and what they're experiencing, and also why you choose that approach.
So the work Angus and I do with couples is we like to do it in a retreat. Is this not working? Yeah. We like to do it in a retreat format, because we find that it really supports what we're doing to have people settle down. And so when they're committing to spending 4 days with us, and then we have follow-up sessions afterwards, it really helps them to get quiet, to hear what we're pointing to more easily. And so that's why we use the retreat format for that. And so the container is typically the same. We ask them to get out of their day-to-day environment. We ask them to, put their day-to-day life aside so that they can really relax and just be present. And then the process when they're with us is a combination of joint sessions and individual sessions. And we tell them that we don't know how much time you're going to get together, because it's going to depend on what you hear, because Angus and I are really committed to the joint sessions being really productive, and for them not to become just going through the laundry list of woes, which just gets people more stirred up. And so we find that, when we have the capacity to work with them individually and then bring them together, that we can kind of see, like, are they able to hear each other? Are they more deeply connected to that space of love within themselves? Are their minds more clear? And so that part is very organic. We have no idea of how that's going to unfold, and we just have to see what shows up in the moment. And then, after they have that experience in the retreat, we recognize now they've got to go home and deal with all of the things in their lives. And so that's why we have the integration to support them in integrating what they've seen during our time together into their lives. Yeah. Anyone else? All right, well, I just want to thank you for being such a wonderful listening group and for all of the conversations. It's been so wonderful to be with all of you, and my heart is very full. So thank you very much. Take care.